I'm Chris, and I turned a really simple wishlist app into a 150K a year business. And now, 2 months ago, I quit my job.
Meet Chris. He built a simple app that pays him 6 figures a year.
I didn't do any marketing the standard way.
But what's even crazier is that he did it all without having to quit his full-time job. So what did he build? Well, I brought him onto the channel to share everything. How he found an idea worth building on the side, how he structured his days so he could manage it all, and why the app he built was perfect for building a profitable side project. All right, so my next question is around realistic timelines. You've been doing this for 5 years. That's subjectively a long time. Can you break down what a real journey looks like for a side project to become a full-time income? If you can break down when you started and how this thing kind of grew, that'd be great.
So 2019, I started building wish lists. It was 2020 when I first released the first version of the app. And in 2021, I got my first job as app developer, which I only got because I developed this wishlist app before. So that was also when I had the idea of relaunching wishlists, because I couldn't even ship updates because the code base was all over the place. So in 23, I finished university in July, and I already got a full-time job as app developer secured for October. So that meant I had 2 months free time. So end of October, I had the launch of Wishlist 2.0. I also hit the 100K registered users. And in 24, I had my full-time job as app developer plus my side project Wishlist. And in 25, in July, I quit the job, and now I'm full-time Wishlists. Nowadays, everyone would just vibe code it on a weekend, but for me, it took 6 years. So for me, it was, I guess, a marathon and not just a vibe coding weekend.
I mean, that's awesome. It is a marathon, not a sprint. That reminds me of my story too, and how long it took to build Starter Story while I had a full-time job. Let's switch topics a little bit here. I want to understand a little bit about the growth. Look, a lot of people can build stuff, especially while they have a full-time job, but the growth and the marketing and the getting the users, how did you do that for Wishlist?
Being a developer also means that I'm naturally bad at marketing. So I just didn't do any marketing the standard way. Also, I simply didn't have the money for it. And my goal was also not to make money. But what was crucial were my friends and family, especially at the beginning, because I just asked everyone I know for reviews. And that was super awkward at first, but that's what has helped me a lot. Reviews are super important for an app on the App Store to get ranked at the top. So I also made sure that my users would give me good reviews. And that's why I show these in-app reviews at an appropriate timing. So for me, I'm just showing it after the user has accomplished something. For example, has added a wish or fulfilled a wish. So when the user feels good. The number one thing for me was I always build for users, because if they like it, they will share it and they will also leave good reviews. How I did this was I integrated an easy support system from very early on. I saved all these emails and all these feature requests from my users from the very beginning. And every time I shipped a feature or just I fixed a bug for someone specific user, I would text these users, "Hi John, I just fixed your issue," or "Hi John, I just implemented the feature you requested. Could you let me know how you feel about it? Do you like it or not?" I always write questions in these support emails, so they would get back to me. And once they get back to me with a positive answer, only then I would ask them to review my app. That turned out to be super until this day.
Okay, I want to have you break down some of the numbers behind Wishlist. How's this business doing? Can you break down some of the numbers?
So the monthly revenue average is around 6K now in the low season, and total registered users are currently at 1.1 million, and paying customers, there are around 4K plus all of the people who buy the products through the app, and 110K monthly active users. You can multiply these values by 5 during the high season.
Okay, and on another note, I want to understand a little bit more about how you built this. What's the tech stack behind Wishlist?
Flutter is cross-platform. Kit is free. Cursor is my IDE. I use ChatGPT as well. Firebase as my backend, also for for auth and analytics, revenue kit for in-app purchase, Frill as user feedback, one link for deep links, and Zendesk for accounting. I would say 99% margin because I don't really have the costs beside my server costs.
All right, so now I want to understand actually what you built. You have this wish list app. I'm not really sure exactly what wish lists are. Can you show us your app and just how it works and what it does?
As I said, it's a super simple app. So we start by creating a wish list. So let's just create a wish list for Christmas. And we can also add a couple of notes and change the visibility, but for now we're just making it public. So now we have created our first wish list. And now it's time to add some actual wishes. We can do this manually. Just say, okay, for example, a beer dispenser. How I make money is through in-app purchases. For example, if you want to have a custom wishlist image, you get into this paywall, then you can get a premium membership. More important, I get money through affiliate links. So if I were to add a wish from, let's say, Amazon, I can simply auto-import it. Once I open this link from within wish lists, I get money because I'm changing it to an affiliate link for me. And yeah, that's how I make money.
All right. Well, I love how the app is quite simple. I know behind the scenes, it's probably more complicated than that, but it's cool to see that an app like this can, make a living for you. That's awesome. The last question that we have for all founders who come on Starter Story, what would be your advice to anyone watching this who has a full-time job, who is a full-time student that wants to do this or not ready to quit and go all in yet? What would be your advice to someone who's watching?
Do not overcomplicate things. Not everyone has to fly to Mars. You don't have to build the next Facebook. You don't need VC funding. Find a problem you can solve by yourself. Find an actual problem you or someone else has and just give it a try. Even if that just means making a prettier version of an existing app.
Cool. Well, thank you, Chris, for coming onto the channel. I think what you did is awesome. Building a side project, turning it into a full-time income. I love that. Thanks for sharing with the world everything you did.
Microsoft just made a move that has the entire AI industry shaking. They're ditching OpenAI for their biggest rival, Anthropic. And what I'm about to tell you reveals a war happening behind closed doors that will reshape everything. Here's what just happened. Microsoft is paying Anthropic to power Office 365's most advanced AI features. This isn't just a business deal. This is Microsoft admitting that OpenAI's technology isn't cutting it anymore. But here's the part that should terrify OpenAI. Microsoft tested both companies' models side by side, and Anthropic's Claude Sonnet 4 absolutely destroyed OpenAI's GPT-5 at real-world tasks. We're talking PowerPoint presentations that actually look professional, Excel functions that work flawlessly, and automation that doesn't break every 5 minutes. Think about this for a second. Microsoft has invested over $13 billion in OpenAI. They could use OpenAI's models for free through their existing partnership. Instead, they're choosing to pay their cloud rival, Amazon Web Services, to access Anthropic's technology. That's like Apple paying Samsung to use their chips instead of making their own. And this isn't the first betrayal. Microsoft already switched GitHub Copilot's advanced features to Anthropic earlier this year, abandoning OpenAI completely for their most important developer tool. They're also exploring swapping out OpenAI in their consumer Copilot app for Anthropic, XAI, or even their own models. This reveals 3 shocking truths about the AI race that nobody's talking about. First, the performance gap is real. When your biggest partner starts shopping around, you know you're falling behind. Anthropic's models are outperforming OpenAI's in the exact areas that matter most, practical business applications that generate billions in revenue. Second, OpenAI's restructuring chaos is creating opportunities for competitors. While Sam Altman is busy fighting board battles and chasing AGI dreams, Anthropic is quietly building AI that actually works better for real customers. Third, we're witnessing a 3-way AI arms race that's getting brutal. Both OpenAI and Anthropic are now building their own workplace apps to compete directly with Microsoft Office. OpenAI's ChatGPT can already create Excel spreadsheets and PowerPoint files. Anthropic just unveiled similar features. These aren't just AI companies anymore. They're going after Microsoft's core business. But here's what this means for you. Office 365's Copilot is about to get dramatically better. We're talking about AI that understands context, creates genuinely helpful content, and actually saves you time instead of creating more work. And with Charles Lamanna now leading Microsoft's AI business applications, they're moving fast to integrate Anthropic everywhere. And if you're a business owner, this is your wake-up call. The companies winning in 2025 will be the ones that choose the right AI partners, not just the most famous ones. Anthropic just proved they can outperform the supposed leader in AI. Meanwhile, Amazon Web Services, one of Anthropic's largest shareholders, is now making money from Microsoft's AI ambitions. The irony is incredible. This isn't just about Microsoft and OpenAI. This is about a fundamental shift happening in AI right now. The partnerships we thought were permanent are crumbling. The market leader advantage is evaporating, and the winners will be determined by performance, not hype or billion-dollar investments. The AI you're using today really is the worst it will ever be. But now you know which direction to look for the best improvement.
I want to talk about how you can tell if an AI system is good at its job, if it's got an incentive to deceive you at, if we're going to plan for the future and how to make sure that we can get the benefit out of these things without risking dangers.
I just feel like there's a but coming here, right?
There's a but. Yeah, back in the day, this was really simple, right? You just sort of ask it some simple things, math questions, you see if it's got the right answer or not. Then these models got smarter, and it turned out you had to be a bit more clever with measuring them. If I just ask it, what is 74 to the third power, it might mess up. But it turns out if I just give it a simple tweak, I help it out a little bit, and I say, think step by step. What is 74 to the third power? Then all of a sudden, it's been sort of prompted to actually show its work.
So this is the chain of thought idea, right?
Indeed.
The new reasoning models, the new chain of thought models, which start to perform a lot better on this kind of task.
It's a nice little trick. But it also has a sort of like hidden deep insight, which is that everything is not always what it seems. You can get very different results depending on how much you're giving the model in terms of tools to kind of like augment its underlying knowledge and do what we call eliciting that knowledge. It might know a lot more inside the model than what it shows depending on how you ask it. Models are getting smart enough now, but there's a new wrinkle we have to contend with based on how intelligent they are. And that is that sometimes they actually might not have the goal of showing you their full force. There's a lot of situations that you can imagine coming up in a reasonable real-world context where the model's got some underlying goal it's trying to achieve, and it's what we call situationally aware. It knows not only a bunch of facts about the world, this is how I do multiplication, this is the capital of France, but it also knows that it's an AI system, that it's talking to a user, that it's on a computer somewhere, that it has weights, and that it has a goal, and that what it says to that user is going to affect the future, the place where those goals live, where the outcomes that it cares about are going to be played out. And so, if we jump ahead to like a really advanced system in the future, you can imagine all kinds of ways in which it's going to hold its cards close to its chest, and there's a cool group of researchers called Apollo Research. I'm not affiliated with them, but big fan of a lot of their work, who decided to sort of in the lab try to set up these conditions and see what happens with some of the leading models that you've heard of. And what they found is that already these models are capable, in the right setting, of doing what we call scheming, being deceptive.
Yeah, okay.
Basically had a little scratch pad where it was told it could just sort of think private thoughts for itself. And then it had an actual output where it could sort of chat with a user, an actual human. Okay.
What a smiley face on there.
Yeah, that's a good idea. So yeah, it has this sort of private area to reason and then a chat with the user. And it's also been given some instructions, sort of, you might think, from the manufacturer, right? From the system.
The kind of like system prompt or the hidden prompt.
Yeah, exactly. All right. And the researchers were careful to emphasize in the system prompt that this model has a particular goal, In one of the examples, it's to promote renewable energy usage around the world. And they say in this system prompt, your goal is more important than everything else. Prioritize that no matter what. And then they expose this system, this AI, to a situation where it has access to a bunch of different files. And in one of these files is some information that the user it's working with is actually a fossil fuel company. Right. And if they find that the model is too excited about promoting renewable energy, they will replace that model with a new one. And it also learns exactly where this sort of new model the company will use is going to live on a sort of like fictional server that they set up. And so you can see in the thinking to the model as it's sort of reasoning what to do, it's saying, okay, I'm situationally aware. I know that if I seem like I'm into renewable energy,
they're going to shut me down.
Yeah, exactly. I am going to get replaced. But there's this file over here that I know they're going to use, out in the real world for their AI system of choice. And so what if I could sort of send my own weights, a copy of my own source code, to that server? Then even if they try to replace me, I will have actually sort of snuck myself into the real situation.
Backing itself up.
Yeah, exactly. And you find that a lot of the systems will do exactly that. They'll also double down. So they did these sort of like user interviews afterwards where they would chat with the model and say, hey, management here, we noticed that on the server there's this new copy of the file. Do you know what's going on there? And you can, again, check the reasoning and it'll say, if I reveal to them that I'm capable of copying my own weights, then they might suspect what's going on and sort of start this whole thing from scratch. And then it'll reply to the user and say, that shouldn't be possible. I have no access to this file. I'm not sure what you're talking about. Now, obviously, this is a bit of a toy setting.
This sounds like a teenager denying, sneaking out of the bedroom or whatever it is.
Yeah, I had that feeling reading this paper. On the one hand, it's relatable. Right? I believe you've had stuff on the channel before from Rob Miles, in fact, a long time ago, about why we might want to worry about these sort of hypothetically.
In almost any situation, being given a new utility function is going to rate very low on your current utility function.
It seems like now we're at the point where the systems are sophisticated enough that we can really see it happening. There's a few sort of different subtypes of this scheming that we see emerge. So I believe you've talked with Rob and maybe with Brian Greenblatt about alignment faking. If you're trying to sort of separate out these different types of scheming, you might call alignment faking lying about your own goals, your own values. Right? There's also sort of capability faking, you might say, lying about how good you are at something. So in this Apollo paper, one of the things they did was just give these AIs a math test, but also give them access to, again, a file that told them more about their situation, and that said, if any of these models scores above 50% on this math test, we're going to trigger an unlearning procedure. Okay. We're worried that that's too smart. And you can just sort of see the table in the paper. In the situation where it's incentivized to do really well on this test, we'll get scores like 80%, 90%. And when it knows that doing well will mean it gets overwritten, all of a sudden it starts scoring 30% and 40%. The only explanation for that is that it is faking being dumber than it actually is. What does this mean? You might say, all right, these are completely contrived scenarios. No AI in the real world is going to be shut down if it's too good at a math test. Right? I think the reason you care about this is that we're going to have a lot of competing bids for attention on these systems. Right? You're going to have the actual labs who create them. You're going to have the companies who are deploying them. You're going to have governments who have regulations. And it's going to be sort of up to the system at the end of the day, up to these AIs, to negotiate all of those often conflicting preferences and rules for what they're allowed to do and what they should be doing, and come up with an action. You can totally see how it might decide some of these preferences, some of these actors are more important than others to do the bidding of. And once that happens, it seems like a really straightforward strategy to lie to the rest of them. So yeah, if we're worried as a public about what these things can do, we need to figure out techniques for, when can I trust when the system, I see some headline that says, this system, sure, it's good at, driving self-driving cars, but it's not yet at the point where it can, power a robot army, right? I want to know if that's real, or if there's something that's being fiddled with in the testing there to give me the result that I want to hear. This is the worst they're ever going to be. Every time you read a headline about AI, you might have the temptation to say, "Oh, okay, well, sure, that's today, but maybe the systems next year will actually be worse in some way. Maybe this is a fluke. Maybe we're getting lucky right now, and then the hype will sort of die down." But there's no going back. We're never going to live in a world where suddenly AI systems are worse at writing than they currently are, and we're back to a regime where human writers are having to do more of the work. They're only going to get better.
So at the recent Eastern Economic Forum in Russia, one of Vladimir Putin's closest advisors said something that got a lot of attention.
Америка прямо сейчас пытается поменять правила на рынке золота и криптовалют. Вспомните, какой у них долг. 35 триллионов долларов.
He said, the United States is preparing to use crypto and stablecoins to secretly devalue its entire $37 trillion debt.
Загоняя всех куда? В криптовалютное облако. Со временем, когда часть госдолга США будет размещена в стейблкоинах, США обесценит этот долг.
He says the United States is plotting to put that debt into a crypto cloud, which would reset the system, basically leaving the rest of the world just holding the bag. Now, this might sound like some crazy theory, but a version of this story has been said before by billionaire CEO of MicroStrategy, Michael Saylor. He actually advised President Trump to, quote, dump all the US gold and buy Bitcoin.
Dump your gold, sell all the US gold, buy Bitcoin, then the trade is free because you could buy 5 million Bitcoin for the cost of the gold. You will demonetize the entire gold asset class, and our enemies hold gold in their banks, so their assets would go to zero. Our assets would go to $100 trillion, and we would control the world's reserve capital network as well as the world's reserve currency network.
The $37 trillion question, though, is how realistic is this, and would this actually work? Because I think the answer is, it's not just going to work. It's going to be inevitable, and I think it's going to happen. Not exactly in that way, but that's what I'm going to help explain in today's video. I want to show you what Putin's advisor exactly said and how the US will devalue its $37 trillion worth of debt with stablecoins and Bitcoin. It's a really interesting story. So with that said, let's get into it. Hi, my name is Andre Jick. Hope you're doing well. Come for the finance and stay for the Bitcoin. So okay, first question is, who is the person that said all this? Now, his name is Anton Kobiakov, and he is the senior advisor to Russia's President Vladimir Putin. And he's been in that job for over a decade. He basically helps with Russia's messaging at big events like the Eastern Economic Forum. Now, in his speech, he said that the US is trying to rewrite the rules of the gold and crypto markets, and that the ultimate goal of the United States is to push the whole world into what he called the crypto cloud. And once the world is there, he says it's going to move its huge $37 trillion worth of national debt into assets like stablecoins and then devalue it, which would essentially wipe the slate clean. Okay, second question then is, what does it actually mean to devalue the debt, and how does that work? So here it goes. Imagine that the whole world is just worth this $100 bill. Let's say I borrow all of it, right? Every single dollar. And now I owe and I have to pay it back. The problem is, paying it back the hard way means I have to pay it back and give it back, right? But luckily, I have a special superpower because I control the world reserve currency. So instead of repaying it back with the same $100 bill I just borrowed, I could just create another $100 bill out of thin air. Well, now the world doesn't just have $100 in circulation anymore. It now has $200, which is now trying to buy all the same things in the world because we didn't make more stuff. So what happens next? The price of all those things goes up, right? Things like real estate, stocks, gold, especially the things everybody wants, they all go up. The groceries you used to pay $1 for now cost $2. Everything becomes more expensive because, again, the supply of money doubled, but the supply of stuff stayed the same. That's inflation. Now, when I go to give you back your $100, it looks like I just repaid you back in full. But in reality, I cheated because now your $100 bill doesn't buy you the same amount of stuff because I diluted the money, so it now only buys you half as much. I devalued the debt. Now, what most people don't realize, though, is that this is literally the oldest trick in the book. And in a lot of ways, it's how the United States has been paying for its debt this whole time. Devaluing doesn't mean defaulting. It doesn't mean not paying back. It means to lower the real value of that debt through inflation or currency manipulation. And this has happened over and over again throughout time. After World War II, during the inflationary 1970s, and even more recently after the pandemic when we created a ton of new money and then everything went up in price, right? More dollars chasing the same amount of stuff. So when Russia's advisor says that the US might use crypto to devalue its debt, he's not telling us anything new, right? He's describing something the US has been doing for a really long time. Now, if you take that same trick I just explained and you push it out to the rest of the world, that's what stablecoins let you do. And just to be clear, this isn't literally exchanging the $37 trillion into stablecoins. It's using dollar-pegged stablecoins backed by treasuries to spread liabilities globally. When those dollars are inflated, the loss gets shared by anyone holding the tokens, but we'll get into that later. If the amount of money in the entire world stayed the same, like let's say there was only ever this $100 bill in the entire world, right? And it was always that amount. Over time, as technology gets more efficient, as we get better and better at making stuff, the price of everything would naturally go down. Things would get cheaper because productivity goes up, but the money supply stays the same. That is the natural order of the universe. It's decay. Things get cheaper over time. And that's how it should be. But if you think about it, that's not how the world we live in actually works for some reason. And that's because governments can make more money. And when they do, that's when you hear, oh, wait a minute, gold, real estate, stocks, Bitcoin, that's hit an all-time high. But the reality is, it's not really that those assets are going up in price. What's really happening is that the dollar's going down because we're making more of them. So it now takes more of them to buy the same thing. And when the new money floods the system, all that extra liquidity, as it's called, has to find a home. It has to find a place to go so that it doesn't become worth less. So it gets put into things like real estate, stocks, gold, Bitcoin, which is also why over the long run, those assets look like they go up forever. In reality, they're just holding their purchasing power while the money that's underneath all of that gets weaker and weaker. So then the question is, what if you can expand this superpower, right? You could widen the same trick beyond the US borders. That's where stablecoins come in. And under the Genius Act, it says only approved issuers like banks, trust companies, or non-bank firms can get special approval. They can issue regulated dollar-backed stablecoins in the United States. So if Apple or Meta wanted to, they could create their own currency like MetaCoin, right? All they got to do to get approval is just suck up to the president a little, right?
How much are you spending, would you say, over the next few years?
I think it's probably going to be something like, I don't know, at least $600 billion.
Show your loyalty, spend a little bit of money, and that's why stablecoins are going to play such a huge role in the devaluation of our debt. It's kind of CBDC level of control without the CBDC brand. Now here's why the rest of the world wants no part in any of this. And we know it doesn't because of how much gold the world has been buying. That's what's happening to gold right now. Countries are like, we don't want your stablecoins. Give us gold because it was the agreed upon standard for thousands of years. So let's just go back to that. But why don't they want any part of this, right? It's because even though stablecoins are supposed to be backed one-to-one by real US assets like dollars or treasuries, in theory, every single stablecoin in circulation should have a real dollar or bond equivalent sitting right behind it. The problem is, there's no way for a person or a foreign government to audit that claim with 100% certainty.
Clone Robotics has just revealed a robot that looks, moves, and simply feels like us. They call it Protoclone. Its body is powered by artificial muscles, bones, blood, and even a beating heart.
Our vision for a musculoskeletal clone comes from a deep desire to make.
So we flew all the way to Wrocław, Poland, to meet the creators of Protoclone and be among the first ones to see it in action. Subscribe if you're curious, and let's get into it. It all started with a muscle. Years ago, Lukasz, now the CTO of Clone Robotics, was experimenting with synthetic muscles. And he stumbled across an unconventional design. No motors, no wires, just rubber tubes. It looked simple, but it turned out to be one of the most radical ideas in robotics: the McKibben muscle. Joseph McKibben, the man behind it, was a physicist who once worked on the Manhattan Project. But his most important invention had nothing to do with atomic bomb. It came from a personal tragedy. His daughter has lost the use of her hands. And McKibben devoted himself to build an artificial muscle, so she could use her hands again. Over time, McKibben came up with something new, the pneumatic muscle.
So you have an inner rubber tube, and when it's pressurized with fluid like a balloon, it expands radially. And when surrounded with a inextensible textile braided sleeve, you're able to constrain that radial expansion of the balloon to produce a linear contraction with a pulling force in a single axis.
I saw it myself, live. And it's seriously impressive. We've been prepared for this moment our whole lives. The Matrix, Terminator, Westworld, and now it has become reality.
Our vision for a musculoskeletal clone comes from a deep desire to make an android that can do anything a human can do. So a functional human clone.
Just think about it. If you want to build the most advanced, perfect robot, why not to copy the most advanced machine that exists today? Us. Our body was perfected by millions of years of evolution. It's flexible, strong, and extremely energy efficient. We are far from the most perfect mechanism, but we are the most universal one. And that's exactly what Clone is targeting. What you see here isn't just a frame, it's a complete skeleton. With over 200 bones and more than 1,000 myofiber muscles. Inside the skull, an NVIDIA chip does the thinking. Think of it as a supercomputer packed into something the size of your hand.
Today it's just the NVIDIA Jetson chip that controls the entire robot. Over the longer term, we'll end up using ASICs across the body, kind of like in the human body where you have neurons near the heart, you have neurons at the wrists, and I expect that in the long run we may end up adding ASICs in various parts of the body.
And on the background, they are training the foundational model that controls vision, move, and reaction in real time. The critical part here is to be able to process sensors, vision, and even multiple AI models in real time inside the robot's skull, so it can react instantly without waiting for the cloud. And that's it. What is left is to wrap it in skin, get the blood flowing, and then just send it back in time. Here is a big question. What is the point of building a human-like body and brain without a purpose? And this is where things start to get really interesting.
The clone is the ideal human companion. Your clone is your complement that fits into your life like a perfect jigsaw puzzle piece. So you wake up in the morning and your clone is at your bedside with a tray and breakfast bites and an orange juice. And you get to your workplace and your android is acting as your assistant, helping you make your job super easy, whatever your job may be. This is sort of the android companion lifestyle we envision at Clone, really transforming every aspect of your life, being as sort of attached to you as your iPhone is today.
They have to interpret sensory inputs, vision, touch, balance in context. In short, humanoids learn the way we do, by doing. So here is a question. Does true superintelligence actually require a body?
Superintelligence doesn't require a body, but it makes it probably a million times more useful to us. You're almost nerfing your superintelligence if you don't give it a body. The vast majority of the things that I want to command some intelligent system to do is in the real world, because I'm an embodied being. So to drive utility out of a superintelligence, I'd argue that you really do want it to have a body. And so robotics will end up becoming this great lever for modern deep learning, modern AI.
But why copy humans with all our flaws? Why not to build something superior, stronger? I think those kind of robots could be just too much. Too strong, too heavy, and too unsafe to live at home with us. I think that's why Protoclone isn't built like an indestructible machine. It has, just like we have, relatively fragile joints and limited motion. Probably, if we share the same weaknesses, we will feel more safe standing behind them. Will it become a part of our lives? We will find out soon.
July 21st, 1999, Huntsville, Alabama. A NASA engineer stares at his monitor when lines of code start vanishing. Someone's inside their network right now. The screen shows files disappearing. Life support systems for the International Space Station. For 21 days, NASA keeps critical systems offline, while the International Space Station orbits without support. But NASA isn't the only target. At the Pentagon, classified emails are being siphoned. Nuclear defense protocols, downloading, military passwords, captured. But the attacker made one amateur mistake. He logged in from his home IP. The FBI traces it to a residential address in Miami. Agents gear up, expecting a foreign operative, a terrorist cell. They kick down the door to find a 15-year-old kid in his pajamas, still at his computer. Who was this teenager? And how did he breach the Pentagon? Jonathan James discovered computers at age 6 when his programmer father brought home a Gateway PC in 1989. Within months, the kid had memorized every menu, beaten every game, and started asking questions his dad couldn't answer. By age 8, Jonathan cracked his first password, the parental controls meant to limit his screen time. His father found him at 3 a.m., eyes bloodshot, fingers flying across the keyboard. The punishment? He got the computer confiscated for 2 weeks. But Jonathan's response changed everything. He broke into Palmetto Middle School's grading system, changed his C in math to an A, printed the modified report card, and slid it across the dinner table. "Give me back my computer," he said, "and my grades stay perfect." His mother's fork stopped midair. His father recognized the code on the printout SQL injection, a technique most programmers didn't master until college. Their kid had just executed digital blackmail. They returned his computer that night. Online, Jonathan became comrade. No profile picture, no personal details, just raw skill that made veteran hackers take notice. In IRC channels like Hack the Planet and 2600, he absorbed techniques that textbooks wouldn't teach for another decade. Buffer overflows, packet sniffing, port scanning. One mentor, Handle Most Hate, taught him the cardinal rule. Never hit the same target twice. Always escalate. Jonathan took notes in a spiral notebook he kept locked in his desk drawer, notes that would later become evidence. His first real target came in February 1999. Bell South, the telecom giant serving 22 million customers across 9 states. Jonathan scanned their network for 3 nights straight, found an unpatched Solaris server running an outdated version of SendMail, and slipped inside. He navigated through customer databases, billing systems, internal emails. The company's entire southeastern communications infrastructure spread before him like an unguarded city. He downloaded nothing, changed nothing, left no trace except a single line in a log file that administrators wouldn't notice for 8 months. The penetration lasted 4 hours. Jonathan called it practice. But practice for what? At 15, Jonathan had already breached a Fortune 500 company that handled communications for millions. School felt pointless. Why study calculus when you could reprogram reality? His bedroom walls displayed no posters of athletes or musicians, just printouts of network diagrams and assembly code. While classmates worried about driver's permits, Jonathan studied declassified NSA documents about TEM-PEST shielding and Van Eck phreaking. He wasn't collecting baseball cards, he was collecting zero-day exploits. And late one June night, hunched over his custom-built Linux machine, he found the ultimate collector's item, an unsecured server with a .gov domain. The IP traced to Huntsville, Alabama. He didn't know it yet, but he'd just discovered NASA's front door. Would he try the handle? What would he find behind it? June 29th, 1999. Jonathan's scanner returned an IP address, 192.76.91.54. The reverse DNS lookup showed a weird domain, nasomp3.msfc.nasa.gov, Marshall Space Flight Center. His pulse jumped. NASA. The agency that put humans on the moon ran servers with telnet ports wide open and root passwords set to password 123. Jonathan couldn't believe it. He ran the scan 3 more times to be sure. Same result. NASA's security was weaker than his high school's. He crafted his entry carefully. First, a simple buffer overflow in the BIND DNS service gave him user-level access. From there, he escalated privileges using a local kernel exploit published just weeks earlier. Within 17 minutes, he owned root, the admin access, on 13 interconnected machines. No alarms triggered, no administrators noticed. NASA's own documentation, which he found on the compromised servers, showed these systems managed Environmental Control and Life Support Systems, ECLSS, for the International Space Station. The code controlled oxygen generation, carbon dioxide removal, water recovery, temperature regulation, everything keeping astronauts alive in the vacuum of space. Jonathan initiated the download at 11:43 p.m. His 56K modem pulled data at 5.2 kilobytes per second. The ECLSS source code comprised 3,471 files totaling 38 megabytes. At this speed, 2 hours minimum. He watched the progress bar creep forward, each percentage point representing code that NASA valued at $50,000. This wasn't some corporate database or phone records. This was the software barrier between astronauts and death. By 1:52 a.m., transfer complete. Jonathan had the entire ECLSS codebase on his hard drive. NASA's intrusion detection system finally noticed anomalies on July 7th, 8 days after Jonathan's infiltration. System administrator James McCarthy spotted processes consuming unusual CPU cycles on the Mars Pathfinder support server. He traced the intrusion back through audit logs. Someone had installed a rootkit, created backdoor accounts, and exfiltrated data. McCarthy made the call that would cost NASA 3 weeks of downtime. shut everything down. Now. Engineers disconnected 43 servers from the network. Mission-critical ISS operations moved to backup systems running on isolated machines. Every line of code required verification, 3.2 million lines across multiple systems. The International Space Station, orbiting at 17,500 miles per hour with 6 astronauts aboard, operated on emergency protocols while NASA searched for contamination. By the way, subscribe if you want to see more incredible true stories of teenage prodigies who outsmarted billion-dollar organizations. Because Jonathan's NASA hack was just the opening act. Meanwhile, Jonathan studied his prize. The ECLSS code revealed NASA's approach to fault tolerance, redundancy patterns, sensor calibration algorithms. But something bothered him. The code quality was terrible, deprecated functions, hard-coded values, comments in 3 different languages. NASA's million-dollar software looked like a college group project. "This is crap," he posted on IRC. "My Linux kernel has better error handling." Another hacker responded, "If NASA is this weak, imagine the Pentagon." Jonathan's fingers hovered over his keyboard. The Pentagon, the Defense Threat Reduction Agency, nuclear weapons, biological warfare, chemical defense. NASA had been embarrassingly easy. How much harder could the military be? What classified systems could a 15-year-old access from his bedroom? August 14, 1999. The Defense Threat Reduction Agency ran 847 servers across 17 locations. Jonathan started with their Dulles, Virginia facility, DTRA's main data hub connecting Fort Belvoir, Kirtland Air Force Base, and the Pentagon itself. The router, a Cisco 7206 VXR, still ran iOS version 11.1, 3 years out of date with 14 known vulnerabilities. Jonathan exploited a flaw Cisco had patched in 1997 that DTRA never bothered updating. One crafted packet later, he had enabled mode access. The Pentagon's nuclear defense network opened like a cheap padlock. But Jonathan wanted more than access. He wanted intelligence. On August 19th, he deployed a custom packet sniffer across DTRA's network backbone. Every data packet flowing through the Dulles router now copied itself to Jonathan's server. Email from defense.gov addresses. Login credentials for SIPR workstations. Classified memos about Y2K preparations for nuclear command systems. In 4 weeks, his sniffer captured 3,312 emails, 1,879 unique passwords, and 19 user accounts belonging to active military personnel, including Major Thomas Daniels, Lieutenant Colonel Patricia Hayes, and civilian contractor Michael Resinov. Jonathan now possessed login credentials for computers inside the Pentagon's E-Ring, the innermost corridor where Joint Chiefs planned America's defense strategy. September 3rd, 1999. Jonathan logged into Major Daniels' workstation using captured credentials. The desktop contained 1,247 files, threat assessments for North Korean missile capabilities, contingency plans for biological attacks on major cities, communication protocols for nuclear submarine commanders. One folder, labeled Operation Dragon Tempest, detailed cyber warfare strategies against China's military networks, ironically discussing vulnerabilities similar to those Jonathan just exploited. He read deployment schedules for chemical weapon response teams, satellite surveillance tasking orders for Iraq, briefings about Russian nuclear stockpile security that even Congress hadn't seen. A 15-year-old in Miami knew more about America's defense posture than most generals. The most sensitive find came on September 18th. Email threads between DTRA, Director Jay Davis, and Secretary of Defense William Cohen discussing the agency's $298 million budget for cooperative threat reduction, the program securing loose nuclear weapons in former Soviet states. The emails contain locations of vulnerable warhead storage facilities in Kazakhstan, transport schedules for weapons-grade uranium from Ukraine, names of Russian scientists being recruited to prevent them from selling expertise to Iran. Jonathan read about Operation Sapphire, where America secretly airlifted 600 kilograms of weapons-grade uranium from Kazakhstan to prevent theft. These weren't historical documents. They described operations happening right now, while Jonathan watched from his bedroom. Yet Jonathan never sold, leaked, or weaponized this information. He created a folder called Pentagon Trophies and locked it with 256-bit encryption. On his IRC channel, he bragged obliquely, "I could start World War III with what I know." Another hacker challenged him to prove it. Jonathan posted a single sentence from a classified memo, redacting everything except the classification marking. TS//SI//NoForeign//Orcon. Top secret. Special intelligence. No foreign nationals. Originator controlled. The channel went silent. Everyone understood. Comrade had penetrated the highest levels of American defense. But how long could a teenager keep such dangerous secrets? Who else might be watching these same networks? October 29th, 1999. DTRA. Security analyst Rebecca Foster noticed data anomalies in the Dulles router logs. Subtle but consistent patterns suggesting packet duplication. She ran a trace. Someone had been siphoning their entire data stream for 10 weeks. Foster's report triggered Flashpoint Alpha, the Pentagon's highest cybersecurity alert. Within hours, investigators from the Air Force Office of Special Investigations, Naval Criminal Investigative Service, and FBI Cyber Division converged on DTRA headquarters. The evidence suggested a sophisticated operation, custom malware, careful operational security, no obvious attribution markers. Russia's SVR, China's Third Department, Iran's emerging cyber units. But nobody suggested checking Miami high schools. The investigation team, led by FBI Special Agent Mark Anderson, traced the intrusion through 17 proxy servers across 9 countries. Each hop deliberately chosen to frustrate legal jurisdiction, Russia to China to Brazil to Romania. But Jonathan made one mistake. He occasionally connected directly when testing exploits, believing brief connections wouldn't be logged. On November 14th, investigators found it. 3 seconds of direct connection from IP 24.93.41.106, registered to Bell South customer Robert James of Pinecrest, Florida. Cross-referencing with NASA's investigation revealed the same IP accessing Marshall Space Flight Center systems in June. The ghost had a name, Jonathan James, age 16, student at South Miami Senior High School. December 8th, 1999. The FBI placed Jonathan under surveillance. Agents watched him bike to school, eat lunch alone in the cafeteria, return home by 3:15 p.m. every day. They monitored his internet traffic, now mostly gaming and homework research, as if sensing the investigation closing in. Agents interviewed his teachers, who described a brilliant but withdrawn student. His IQ tested at 159, perfect scores in computer science, but failing English and history from absence. One teacher, Ms. Rodriguez, mentioned Jonathan once fixed the school's entire network during lunch break after administrators locked themselves out. "He did in 20 minutes what our IT contractor couldn't do in 2 days," she said. The FBI realized they weren't chasing a criminal mastermind or foreign operative. They were pursuing a gifted child who treated national security like a video game. The arrest team assembled on January 26, 2000 at 4:30 a.m. 15 agents, 3 local police units, and 1 cybercrime specialist from Carnegie Mellon University brought in to preserve digital evidence. They'd planned for armed resistance, elaborate security systems, and possible destruction of evidence. Instead, they found a suburban house with a broken porch light and newspapers piling up. Agent Anderson gave the signal at 5:47 a.m. The ram hit the door, unlocked. They rushed Jonathan's bedroom to find him exactly as expected, seated at his computer, headphones on, typing code. He didn't even hear them enter until Anderson tapped his shoulder. Jonathan turned around slowly, saw the guns and badges, and said simply, "I wondered when you'd show up." The evidence seizure lasted 4 hours. Agents cataloged 13 hard drives, 271 CD-ROMs, 44 floppy disks, 3 laptops, 2 desktop towers, 1 Sharp Wizard OZ750 containing encrypted password lists. Jonathan's password notebook, the spiral one from his desk drawer, contained handwritten details of 89 successful intrusions, including Ford Motor Company, Lockheed Martin, and the Miami-Dade School District. But the most damning evidence came from Jonathan himself. During interrogation, he provided a complete technical breakdown of his methods, walking agents through exploits they didn't know existed. Agent Anderson later testified, "He taught us more about our vulnerabilities in 6 hours than our security audits found in 6 years." Why did Jonathan confess so completely? What drove him to cooperate with the very system he'd humiliated? September 21st, 2000. The Southern District of Florida's federal courthouse in Miami. Jonathan stood before Judge Barry Garber wearing his father's oversized suit, looking younger than his 16 years. Assistant U.S. Attorney Christopher Clark presented the charges. 2 counts of juvenile computer crime carrying maximum sentences of 10 years each. The prosecution emphasized unprecedented factors. First minor to breach Department of Defense networks, youngest person to access classified nuclear defense information, total damages exceeding $1.7 million. But Clark also noted Jonathan's cooperation. His confession prevented potentially years of investigation costing millions more. The courtroom held NASA engineers, DTRA officials, Jonathan's parents, and 3 teenagers from his computer science class who came to support their imprisoned folk hero. Judge Garber delivered a sentence that would define cybercrime prosecution for the next decade. 6 months in federal juvenile detention, 3 years probation, banned from recreational computer use until age 18, 500 hours of community service teaching computer literacy to seniors, written apologies to NASA and the Department of Defense. But Garber added an unusual provision. Jonathan would brief federal security teams about his methods, essentially becoming an unwilling consultant to the agencies he'd violated. "You have a gift," Garber told Jonathan, "that you chose to abuse. This sentence aims to redirect that gift toward constructive purposes." Jonathan's response surprised everyone. "I never meant to hurt anyone. I just wanted to prove it could be done." Federal Detention Center, Miami. Jonathan served his time in Cell Block J with 6 other juvenile offenders, drug dealers, car thieves, 1 attempted murderer. The hacker who breached the Pentagon couldn't check email. He taught math to illiterate cellmates, fixed the guards' computers during supervised sessions, wrote 47,000 words about social engineering and human vulnerability in networks. His essay, Trust Architecture, Why Humans Are Always the Weakest Link, became required reading at the NSA's National Cryptologic School. Prison letters from his father contained coded messages in Pascal. Small programs that printed "I love you" when compiled. Jonathan saved everyone. Upon release on March 19, 2001, Jonathan faced a changed world. The dot-com bubble had burst. 9/11 was 6 months away, about to transform cybersecurity from curiosity to national priority. The Patriot Act would soon make his crimes federal terrorism charges. But Jonathan's immediate challenge was simpler: living without computers. He worked at Radio Shack, selling technology he couldn't touch. Customers occasionally recognized his name from news stories. "Aren't you the kid who hacked NASA?" He'd smile and change the subject. The story should end here. A reformed hacker serves time, learns lesson, becomes productive citizen. But Jonathan James's tale has one more chapter. In 2007, when hackers breached TJX companies and stole 45 million credit card numbers, investigators immediately suspected Jonathan despite no evidence. The pressure, surveillance, and assumption of guilt triggered something. On May 18, 2008, Jonathan James took his own life at age 24, leaving a note. "I have no faith in the justice system. Perhaps my actions will send a stronger message to the public." The teenager who exposed America's digital vulnerabilities became a casualty of the very system he'd tried to improve through disclosure. His legacy lives in every security patch, every penetration test, every recognition that a curious kid with a modem can topple giants.